Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Orange Sparkle Ball. Are you struggling to implement innovation and change within your organization? With a unique human-centered innovation approach, Orange Sparkle Ball, or OSB, helps organizations break through roadblocks and pain points to achieve measurable results. OSB is not your typical consultancy. OSB's agile approach to innovation allows you to move quickly to action and achieve measurable pilot results. To learn how you can drive innovation and success in your organization, contact OSB today at hello@osb.co. That's hello@osb.co. Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is a Friday, and that means Devin O'Reilly is with us. It is May 26, 2023. We're coming up on the holiday weekend. Lot going on, lots of things to talk about. Devin O'Reilly, it's good to see you.
It's great to see you, Jer. Always good to be in person when we can. And holiday weekend followed by quite a holiday of a week, which we'll get to soon.
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, it's going to be a pretty crazy mix of the Mackinac Policy Conference, Pride, which of course we'll see everybody at, of course, Ferndale Pride on Saturday. And then Sunday, I'm going to stop into the Grand Prix. Basically, this is one of the craziest weeks of the year for me.
For you, for me, for a lot of people who really are kind of in the ethos of the Detroit scene, because you've also got the Movement Festival.
Oh, that's right.
Movement is this weekend.
Movement is this weekend. I've gone many years. I don't know if there's a point where you kind of like move away from movement. I don't know if there is.
Movement away from
movement away. But there's just no way this year that like I can get out there for a day. I was hoping to, but like, you know, it's just the stars didn't align.
Well, I think there's no way to kind of just do movement tepidly. You're either doing it or you're not.
Right. You were either in or out.
And for folks like us who have the Mackinac Policy Conference coming up next week, that is just too daunting of a scenario to try and waste ourselves away with Movement Festival and then do the Mackinac Conference.
And we'll talk in a minute about why we're going to the Mackinac Policy Conference. You're, of course, doing it with your day job. I am doing it with Daily Detroit because there's a variety of reasons. We'll get into that near the end of the show. So before the show, I learned that you tried something that I have not had the opportunity to do anything with. I've seen it on shelves, and I have been curious about it because, of course, it's called Rock and Rye. And
Slow and Low.
Slow and Low.
Which, if you look at the brand, it's kind of listed as Hochstadter's Slow and Low, which the branding is really strange. And I'm still trying to dig into this. I had tried one of their other offerings, their coffee old fashioned that they have, kind of like a bottled coffee old fashioned. And it was really good. So I saw this Rock and Rye and I was like, well, okay, let's give this a shot. I'm picturing, obviously, as you would, Faygo Rock and Rye.
Same here. Whenever I've seen it on the shelf at the store, I'm like very confused about this because it didn't look like anything Faygo.
Right. So that's what I'm expecting. Grab a taste of that. It kind of throws me off because I don't dislike it. I'm like, this is a really good taste. It's certainly, I'm not getting Faygo Rock and Rye though. And come to find out, this is a whole different thing altogether.
Wait. So Rock and Rye is not Rock and Rye.
Faygo Rock and Rye, for the purposes of this, as not to confuse our audience, Faygo Rock and Rye, as we'll call it, is more of like a cream strawberry type
tart cherry.
Yeah, tart cherry type of flavor. This is more or less a bottled old fashioned. It's rye whiskey, rock candy, raw honey, Angostura bitters, and orange peel, which seems like a weird combination, but it really harkens back to like basically a really old school cocktail.
So Rock and Rye, and I've been doing a little bit of look into this as you're talking about it, apparently is its own thing where you put rock candy as part of the booze process.
It's one of those, just again, like the old school cocktails. I mean, an old fashioned, as the name suggests, not to get in, I'm a bit of a cocktail historian, as you might imagine, Jerry, but old fashioned is really named as such because it was the first cocktail essentially invented. You have spirit, you have sugar, and you have fruit, citrus. That's really the basis of the history of cocktails. So old fashions harken back to the original cocktail, and this is what you have. You have your rye whiskey, you have your rock candy and honey for sweet, and you've got your bitters and your orange peel.
Interesting. So different flavor completely.
Different flavor completely. I like it. I mean, frankly, if you like Faygo Rock and Rye, you will not like this. If you like a old fashioned cocktail, you will like this.
Interesting. So one, I'm going to have to try this at some point, but also I'm just so fascinated to learn that, like, now I have questions. Like, was Faygo Rock and Rye developed as an offshoot of the cocktail?
Well, clearly,
like,
the
how
cocktail,
did this all come together?
I mean, the cocktail, we're talking back 200 plus years. So the cocktail unequivocally came first. The question is, did Rock and Rye purposely rip off the cocktail, try and riff off that and make it like a sweet kind of soda pop version? Or is it meant to be something else altogether?
These are the things that I wish I could have interviewed the Fagenstein brothers for, right? Like, if you could go back into Detroit history and interview anyone, I feel like the creators of Faygo is going to have to be somebody, some Werner's family members over time. I think I know who you would interview if given the chance in Detroit history.
Well, old Potato Patch Pingree, of course.
Now, would you call him Potato Patch Pingree to his face?
How tall was he?
I understand that you are definitely, you take into account people's height when it comes to these things.
Well, he looks like an imposing man when I stare at a statue in Grand Circus Park. I just don't know if, sometimes statues belie the actual stature of the person that they're embodying.
Well, it's funny you talk about statues or pictures maybe not being 100% accurate, because for where I've been, I went and saw the Six musical.
Which is interesting, Jared. I'm a fan of the arts and the theater. I don't get there as much as I would like, which is to say I rarely do, but I love to hear your experience in doing so.
Well, yeah. So the Fisher Theater is an absolute gem of a place. Like, if you want a top-notch theater, that you need to look no farther than the Fisher Building and the Fisher Theater. It's a great thing. It's a great experience. You go into the beautiful big lobby, then you go into this, what's, a mid-century modern style, because originally it was built as an Aztec style.
Mm-hmm.
Then it got converted to mid-century modern. The acoustics are solid. Like, it's a very intimate theater. I felt like I was very close to the action wherever I was. But I went and saw the musical Six, which is about Henry VIII's six wives. And the reason I mentioned the changing of a statue or a profile pic is that one of the wives, apparently, Henry VIII was very upset because it didn't look like the painting that he had received for one of the six wives, which actually then he ended up then declaring her his sister and putting her up in a castle. Because Henry VIII, all of this is going to be like pretty terrible as far as things done, because Henry VIII was Henry VIII.
Right, and I feel like sometimes, Jared, we talk about Henry VIII as almost like a comical or historical figure. Has there been any talk about the fact that he was, in fact, most likely an absolute sociopath, like a psychotic, just deranged individual?
100%, and that's one of the reasons I enjoy.
Who was also the King of England.
Right. So I enjoyed this musical because it really had an empowering perspective going through the six wives who all could sing. In fact, two of the wives actually have ties to the area, being that they went to U of M.
Oh, nice.
So Zan,
okay,
who plays Anne Boleyn.
Anne Boleyn being one of the more famous of the six wives, I think.
Right. And then Aline plays another one of the wives. So they both have connections because they both went to U of M. I believe Zan graduated in 2020. Anyway, they all do a wonderful job. I would think that if you want to check out all of the singers, it's absolutely great. It's this basically big musical number that talks about a competition between the six wives and which wife had it worse, and going through their stories. And it's some great musical numbers, a little bit of dark humor, but I think it really comes from a more empowering perspective, because here's the thing. Without those six wives, who would remember Henry VIII? Because you don't know who Henry VII is. Like, nobody talks about Henry IV.
And I don't think there was a ninth. We've got Henry V because of Shakespeare.
Okay.
But still.
But, like, nowhere near as notable. So, like, in reality, he's actually notable because of the women.
Which is unfortunate. Sounds like an absolute terrible, horrible human being.
I was watching one TikTok from a London tour guide that I really like, Jay Draper. Apparently, he was responsible for, like, thousands of, like, decapitations and executions. Like, Henry VIII was an awful dude.
Yeah, you know what, Jerry? It was really good that we ended up getting that whole democracy thing here in the known world. It's probably for the better, right?
Right. But I do suggest go check it out at the Fisher Theater. There's just so many good shows that come through town.
You know what, Jerry? I want to just do a quick kind of side tangent, because something I've always looked at the Fisher, the building and the theater, is I want there to be a food and beverage space there, a location. And we talk about Zenith from time to time, RIP a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Quirky, crazy place. But why can't there be more food and bev in the Fisher Building?
That's a good question. Like Stella Good Coffee was not open at the time, although they're all usually open. So I went midweek. I never expect anything to be the same midweek as if you go, because like midweek you're going to have a little bit less of a crowd. You're going to have a different crowd because you're going for the art, right? You're not going to be staying out super late on a Wednesday usually. But I wonder also if it's like a question about like demand. So you've got Cuisine over there that's been there around since like 2001.
I forget about that place.
Yeah, so that's over there. And so that's something to check out. But like you're right. That's always been though kind of like I don't want to say dead zone because that's unfair because like there's the Palliser Street neighborhood and Bethune and all those streets and those great houses. So it's like not a dead zone, but it's not an active zone. It's really hard to like pin that area by the Fisher.
I was kind of going on a bit of a tangent, but I'm not here to try and break that down. Maybe, Jared, we can bring someone on who could really talk to us about that. But it really does strike me as a place where there should be a really marquee restaurant, a really cool restaurant in the Fisher Building. It deserves it. And it just either hasn't been able to do it or no one has kind of dreamed that dream yet. I don't know.
Well, the Fisher Building in its day was kind of like the Somerset Mall, right? Yeah. 3 stories of stuff. And now, I mean, there's some stuff like Pure Detroit and the Peacock Room and stuff to check out. No doubt. Go check it out. But it used to be kind of 3 stories of stores and shoe shine and all this other stuff. And it's just not. And I think it's about having all the people around there in that density and whatever. But I think if with the right investment and planning, something really cool could be done with it.
I hope so.
Absolutely. Where have you been?
Well, Jer, I was at an event that really turned out the crowds. It was a beautiful day, which it's been beautiful here in Michigan for a little while now. But I went to the opening of the new Southwest Greenway.
Ooh.
Which is kind of, and we can get into it a little bit more, but essentially this is kind of a half-mile piece of this larger kind of Joe Louis Greenway complex. So when we talk about the Joe Louis Greenway, Joe Louis Greenway is basically the entire circle of this Greenway. The Southwest Greenway is really connecting Bagley Street to the West Riverfront, which is being redeveloped into an incredible space. We talked about it on the show. The Ralph Wilson Foundation is just pouring millions into making this amazing park on the West Riverfront. So this is going to connect.
They're actually up for another $35 million. I'm just looking this up now from the press release. $35 million from Ralph Wilson, $20 million from William Davidson, $15 million from the Gilbert Family Foundation, and Kellogg's in for $5 million. So like throwing like $70 million bucks.
Total group effort. And this is a really important connector. And they talked about this because every one of those foundations that threw money in spoke, as well as Ford, as well as the mayor, as well as Wayne County, Jared. And here's where this is kind of important for people to kind of visualize why this is important, is this connector being able to take Bagley, and essentially Bagley represents that intersection of Corktown, Southwest Detroit, kind of that area in the riverfront. It really represents that intersection. So you've got, literally, we were at the ribbon cutting. There's a beautiful pathway. Almost just a block away is the Michigan Central Project. So you have Michigan Central Station, you have the book depository. So you're connecting Corktown, the huge Michigan Central Project. You're connecting that to kind of the gateway of Southwest Detroit over on Bagley. The crossing, the bridge is right there. So you're at this real confluence of all these things that are happening. And this Greenway takes you, beautiful Greenway, kind of winds down a little bit and takes you right to Ralph Wilson Park on the riverfront. So it's really that connector that takes you from that density of Corktown to the density of the riverfront.
Now, do you think that Michigan Central in some ways is a catalyst? Is this all coming together at the same time? Because I look at that and, Michigan Central by the end of everything, I've talked about on the show this week is like $1 billion project. This is yet another layer of things happening. Is this kind of a thing where the momentum really starts to get started with this?
Yeah, there's no doubt that Michigan Central and that private investment, we're over $1 billion now that Ford is pouring into that project. There's no doubt that that was a catalyst, because without that, it would have been somewhat arbitrary to make the beachhead of this Greenway be the Michigan Central area. And so the reason it is because you have this density of Michigan Central. Now you have the ability to create a Greenway that runs to the riverfront. So ultimately the goal of the Joe Louis Greenway is to connect some 27 miles all around Detroit, touching everything from Dearborn, Hamtramck, Highland Park, Ferndale, Grosse Pointe. It really is going to eventually, the plan is to almost encircle the city and connect it with other trails. Going to connect with the Wayne County parks, the Wayne County trails, the Rouge Trail, Ann Arbor Trail, all that stuff.
Now, I know that there's more money that's to be raised with this, right? So I think it's something like $350 million more that they're looking to put together. Now, that's not just for the Greenway construction, but that's apparently also going to be for the Detroit riverfront, because there's still work to be done with the riverfront, and also kind of like a fund to help maintain all of that. So this is something that is still kind of, I guess, unfolding over time as resources become available.
Yeah, the plan is to make it sustainable. Obviously, you need a lot of money for that. And like the $350 million number was mentioned even in the remarks. But man, I gotta say, Jared, it's like if you're gonna do a project of that massive scale, having multiple or some of the largest foundations in the state and even in the nation with Ralph C. Wilson, William Davison, Gilbert, and W.K. Kellogg, I mean, that's a hell of a good start.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think also it's key to note that this is being put together by conservancies and groups that are not necessarily governmental entities. And that means that it's not going to be a heavy weight on the taxpayers.
Oh, no, not at all.
Right. Because like that's the other thing about this is that I sometimes hear the debate of like, well, why does the city do that? The city isn't like, the city is of course providing support and things like that, but like the city isn't doing this, right? Like the state may be giving a grant or something, but the state, like this is conservancies doing this.
This is almost purely a massive philanthropic endeavor. Of course, you have the city who needs to be kind of a quarterback on a project like this. You have obviously some private investment, but yeah, this is a philanthropic endeavor, which is fantastic. Again, it's not something that the taxpayers are going to really have to foot the bill. This is just something purely for the good of the community. And I really hope that it does help to connect those three communities. The riverfront, which is not really a community, but just an amazing space. The riverfront, Corktown, and Southwest Detroit. And I have to point out, shout out to Mark Wallace of the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy. And this is all part of Mark's incredible vision. But he did mention that like Corktown and Southwest Detroit are amazing riverfront adjacent communities, but they don't feel like they're on the river.
Mm-mm.
And this Greenway, part of it aims to try and make that feel different.
I wasn't going to mention this, but I stopped by Riverside Park over there by the like Fort Street in the base of West Grand Boulevard, down there by the Ambassador Bridge. And there was a statue unveiling recently, but I don't want to talk about the statue as much because, frankly, I don't think that's the center of the park. Like, it's great, whatever. But what stunned me going around there, because I didn't go to the press announcement, I just wandered through, because I sometimes do that. I want to get a vibe when actual people are there. And then for me, it's a huge children's area. Some great picnic tables that are actually like picnic areas are actually covered structures, which is kind of nice on the riverfront. Nice big like walkway areas. And it's kind of crazy because you see the demolition of the Boblo boat terminal in the distance. There's actually like trains nearby. It is kind of in a corner right now until this Greenway stuff gets done. But I want to say like it's really nice. Like you just go through there and you're like, oh, and I think so much of the coverage talked about the new statue by the Nordine brothers or whatever. They've done a number of works. They're city-based. But to me, the greater gem is like this park that has so many neat amenities, like the huge children's play area. Like these things that people were using it, like people in the community with their dogs and
Tremendous
all that
dog
other
park.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so to me, I feel like that's really of worth and of mention, because I sat there, I'm like, this is a quality space, and it's going to be interesting to see how they connect it up, being that it's kind of orphaned right now, but people were still using it, even though it was tucked behind some tracks and down at the foot of Grand Boulevard.
Yeah, the plan, and it's a plan that has real legs, and I think it's not some pie in the sky vision. It's a real plan that has action. But yeah, it's to basically connect it all. Not that somebody would in one day bike all 27 miles of this Greenway eventually.
I think some of our listeners would.
I think you're right.
I think some of our listeners would.
But the point is, Jared, that you could literally bike 27 miles through beautiful Greenway, through rivers, and over all sorts of different topography, through urban areas, through very rural areas of Detroit. Basically, a tour de Detroit of tour de Detroit of sorts.
Shout out to Tour de Trois and that big old bike ride, right? Now that would be a fun one to do, like an actual tour of the whole thing and a bike ride. That'd be very cool when that happens. I do want to mention before we go that next week you're going to be hearing me from Mackinac Island. Longtime listeners of the show will know that this will not be our first time up there, where we will be doing interviews and all kinds of things. And now, Devin, this is where your kind of day job intersects, because it's the Mackinac Policy Conference.
It is the Mackinac Policy Conference, the Catalina wine mixer. Pow! It's a big deal. Anyone who's been there knows what we're talking about. I don't want to sound exclusionary, but it is one of those. I know it does catch shade sometimes for various reasons, but it is truly unique. And I think that people who do go up there and get to experience it, you know what we're talking about when we say this is truly one of a kind. Other states try and replicate this, and they're not able to.
So what is the theme this year?
The theme this year is the power of and, which I think is really appropriate for what the chamber is about, trying to be that voice for the business community, but also a advocate for bipartisanship, reaching across the aisle. And so the conference is going to focus on ways to kind of invite dialogue among speakers and attendees of why Michigan needs a and approach instead of a either or. And so it should be this and. We can do both, basically, as some people say now. You can do both.
So you could both attract manufacturing and technology.
You've got the power of and.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
It can be an and approach. We don't have to be divisive. We don't have to say we can't do this because we're doing this. We say we can do both. And I think that's what the conversations are going to be about. We've got, Mark Cuban speaking. We've got Liz Cheney speaking. We've got our conference chair, Matt Elliott of Bank of America, and actually the head of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan, is going to be speaking. There's even going to be some panels on Gen Z and the workforce. So it'll be really cool. It'll really run the gamut. I think, this isn't going to be a stage where you're just going to see the same type of person speaking to everyone. It's going to be really diverse in terms of the types of voices and the types of topics you're going to hear about. Of course, you'll hear from the governor, and of course, you'll hear from Mayor Duggan, who has become a must-see session because he always brings it.
Yeah, and I understand there's going to be some interesting developments. I don't have all of my finger on all the pulses, but I think there's going to be some news made up there, just kind of what I'm feeling and stuff that a lot of our listeners are going to be interested in. And it's an opportunity for me. I like to go up there because, look, let's just be honest. When it comes to a lot of the people that we want to talk to as far as newsmakers and such, sometimes it's hard to get a hold of them. Sometimes it's hard to figure out schedules, whatever. When they're on an island, they can't really run away from me that well.
No, it's just everybody's up there, all hanging out together. It's very just communal in a sense. And I think it creates an intimacy with folks that you might only see on TV or might only see in the newspaper.
And I think that the key to that is, having the flexibility and time. When you're running an organization, a lot of these people are decision makers, or you're a sales guy, or whatever, you're doing a busy job. When you're geographically down here, you are going to be pulled away to the things that you have to handle immediately. I used to work in the corporate world, and I can say, if people say, well, why is it up in Mackinac? To me, if you don't have that physical separation, you don't have a conference. Because you need to be able to be away from the day-to-day. There is a thing where if people look and say, oh, well, somebody's in town or somebody's down the street at whatever TCF Center, they're going to get pulled away. There's going to be another thing. When somebody's out at Mackinac, it's more about creating the space and separation because they would get pulled into the everydays of their job. I mean, I can't tell you how many interviews have been shifted around, moved over the years because things come up with these leaders. When they're on Mackinac, it's like, okay, we can schedule a bunch of interviews. We can have some good conversations. We can talk about what's happening in the region, and you can get a lot more focus than a 15-minute Zoom or a 10-minute Zoom. It's something where you're able to dive in a little bit. You're able to see what people think. I'm able to, go out there and be like, okay, well, where is this thing actually heading? What is the direction of these different proposals or whatever? And get more color and context than you can get over a phone call or just trying to do it in a very distanced manner.
This is the place to do it. Like you said, Jerry, you're going to be able to have those decision makers next to you, interacting with you, and you can have those conversations. You can have a voice in the big conversation. You can be in the room, so to speak. And it does make it a very, very, very unique situation. So it's a whirlwind, Jerry. We're going to have a lot of fun as well. There's going to be a lot of work done.
But a lot of fun, because we do a lot of, you see us on Media Row. There will be days we are literally busting out 8 or 9 interviews.
And then washing that down with some libations at Pink Pony, Horns, Grand Hotel.
I hear there's a new Irish pub.
Oh boy, Jerry. Yes, we will report.
Dowds.
We will report
the Dowd
back.
family.
Yes, we will be 100%. I'm going to go out on a limb here, Jerry, and say we are going to be reporting back on the new Irish pub in Mackinac.
Of course, because you are the man about town, whatever town it is.
Whatever town it may be, cars or no cars.
If you've got things that you want us to talk about or talk to people about, dailydetroit@gmail.com. I definitely would love your feedback. If people, topics that you're interested in, stuff that's on the agenda, not on the agenda, I'm always here to do my best to answer and try to be an advocate for our listeners. All right, Devin, we are on the cusp of a very long weekend. Just as a programming note, there will not be a show on Monday because it is a holiday, but we will get back into your ears as soon as we can settle in and get something recorded up at Mackinac Island. So with that, I am Jer Stays.
I'm Devin O'Reilly.
Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.